Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to Wall Street Hackers. I'm your moderator, Nick Palavita, and today we're going to be looking at some really exciting and new trends and innovations relating to the stock market and the market in general. And with that, we're going to bring in the Wall Street Hacker himself, who received his bachelor's degree in economics at UCLA, his law degree from the University of Miami, and his master's in business administration from NYU. After spending 17 years in New York City working for Wall Street firms, he's here to bring us some insights on what's going on with the market today and what people should be doing or looking at going in the future. So with that, we'll bring in Mr. Peter Bennett. Peter, time to turn over the ball to you.
Oh, thanks, Nick. Thanks for the intro. And you can catch Wall Street Hackers starting live on all our distribution channels, including Pod TV and Roku and whatever you're watching on right now. So this week we had arguably the most powerful evidence of how the market can be delusional. And it has been. I mean, Wall Street Hackers have been saying this since January last year, and it just continues. So we have inflationary numbers that came in, and the CPI came in much more than expected. It was 0.5% for the month of January, 6.4% year over year. Even worse or just as bad, services inflation, which the Fed looks at as one of the key indicators, rose 0.6%, 7.6% year over year, the worst in 50 years since 1972, which not coincidentally was the beginning period of 15 years of rapid inflation. Just keeps looking more and more like the 70s, in energy and labor. Anyway, rents also went up 0.7%, 8.6% year over year. And housing equivalents jumped 0.7%, 7.8%. So you think, okay, this was not good news. The market should have gone down. But JP Morgan looked at these numbers in the morning when they came out before the market opened, and they said, well, the market should be down 1.5%. That's what the analyst said based on these numbers. I think a lot more, because I think this is solid proof of the problem of inflation and that the Fed is way behind the curve. But what did the market actually do? Well, it didn't go down 1.5%. The S&P was basically flat, I think slightly up. The NASDAQ went up 0.5%. So the market just ignores fundamentals, reality. And, one reason is possibly that it's all technicals. There's two ways to approach the market: fundamentals and technicals. This is pretty basic, but everybody's at a different level of knowledge. But in the long run, it's fundamentals that drive the market. Technicals is, as Warren Buffett said, a voting machine to a point, and people look at the charts and say, "Oh, look, it's an upward trend." It's whatever. But that's not what these are. You're investing in businesses, and in the end, it's the fundamentals. So this was not good, and this was, by the way, on top of what we discussed last week on Wall Street Hackers, which was a 517,000 jump in employment. And when we broke that down even further, we looked at minutes used by businesses. And I thought it was a brilliant analysis by one of the analysts I read his article on. And he said there were 18 minutes added to the work week, which meant if you added all those employees that businesses had to hire, or instead use minutes expansion, which is not going to work for the long run, he actually came out that it should have been 1.6 million jobs added in that report. That is so far out of control. And if you look at the medium charts, the long-term charts, everything, the fundamentals are not going the Fed's way, but they have this strategy where they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. And the markets are either delusional because they're believing everything will be great and we won't have a recession and inflation will be under control. And part of that might be the Fed messaging, because they're trying this, we're going to keep rates higher for longer, but not so high. But history shows that, at least accepted economic history shows that everybody always agreed up to this point that you need to get higher than inflation to fight inflation, or at least to inflation, or else the real rates are not high enough. And so it just creates a spiral. So it's not good news in terms of where inflation's going. And in the end, the fundamentals will be, will win out. And, I could be wrong. I've been wrong occasionally in investments and things over the decades I've been investing. Usually I've been right, but I've been wrong. But the evidence just seems stronger and stronger that this is out of control for the Fed and the markets are just delusional. So here's another factor. China is now releasing its COVID policy. Very interesting. China, first of all, is the largest consumer of fuel in the world. It's also the largest consumer of industrial metals. It's also the largest consumer of food. So now that they're coming back, there was a temporary drop in energy prices, and that, of course, helped inflation a lot. But China's, I always said, if they don't come back now, they're going to come back sooner or later, and that demand will recur. So it's China coming back is going to stimulate inflation also, and energy prices. And here's another interesting thing. I just was looking at China. In 2019, I didn't realize this, China led the world in global tourism. And I was surprised by that, but they had 155 million global tourists, which is almost half the population of the United States. And so this tells you a few things about China. Number one, they're continuing to gain on the rest of the world, on Europe, on the United States economically. Two, their coming back is definitely going to have an impact on inflation. They're a major economic power now. And three, this is kind of a joke, but their tourists are very unlikely to switch to balloons. So that's not a good news either for inflation. And finally, in energy, we had actually the President of the United States in a State of Union address. I do try to avoid politics because I know the population is so split up 50-50, but on energy policy, I have issues, obviously, with the administration. I understand what they're trying to do with climate change, but they're not succeeding there. They're hurting our climate change effort as well as the economy. So I have a lot of problems with that. So in the State of the Union address, he said, President Biden said, quote, "We're going to need oil for at least another decade." And at that point, many members of Congress, I assume mostly Republicans, started laughing. And actually, there's a pretty strong argument that Kamala Harris was trying not to laugh because she was holding it in. And then because of that, maybe, or whatever, he said, and beyond that, we're going to need it. Now, later, he did walk back that statement because 10 years, really? I mean, there's a few points here. Number one, it's not reality. If you look at the government, United States government projections, world government, world projections, the International Energy Agency, the U.S. Energy Agency, they're all saying oil might be flat in demand to 2050, or it might go up or down depending on your scenarios. Natural gas very likely will expand in terms of use, partly because it's replacing coal, partly because there's a large and growing population in the world, which we discussed last week. The developing nations are not going to give up their desire for energy, for transportation, for food, for heating food. So you're talking about, it's just not reality. Sorry. But I mean, we're going to need energy a lot more than 10 years. The other thing is, and there were comments about this too. It's like the administration is complaining about the oil and gas industry not producing enough oil and gas. But then they say, well, we might only need it for 10 years or whatever. One of the three reasons they're not producing is the argument that, well, if they are in a terminal business, or if they think they might be in a terminal business, you don't keep producing until the day you go bankrupt. I always use the pizza parlor. I don't keep making the pizzas until I stack them up so high and nobody wants them more and more for years. And then you get to the point, okay, nobody wants them at all. That's not how they work. So oil energy companies are already doing a lot of buybacks. They're also spending 10% of their budgets on converting to other fuels, other sources, more energy efficiency, carbon sequestration. So they're getting ready, and it's not a positive encouragement to say, well, we're going to need it for 10 years, which again, he walked back. I'll say that. But those were the major market stories in the news. 2 quotes of the week. It just goes on and on. I mean, there's so many bright people who are giving comments that, and have been for over a year, that say what's going on is what Wall Street Hackers maintains. Inflation's out of control. Rates are going high. They may go to 6%. It may even go higher. It may take getting higher than inflation or going to inflation, as it has always been considered necessary to fight inflation. So here's the Bankrate chief analyst, quote, "There was nothing in the CPI report to deter the Fed from staying the course of another quarter-point interest rate hike." That's an understatement, but that's right. There's nothing in the report to deter them. In the opposite, they say they're going to continue, and they want to get inflation down to 2%. They're so far. But I really like the quote, and I like it and don't like it in terms of its impact. But this is a quote from the former CEO of Walmart, Bill Simon. And he's probably a really smart guy. I mean, you might not like Walmart. A lot of people love Walmart, but it's definitely been a well-run business. Nobody could contest that. So here's his quote. "The U.S. economy is in a spiral with food, gas, and rent hammering the consumer." Yes, that's the problem with inflation and why the Fed has to fight it, because in the end, inflation will get entrenched and it will do more damage than even a recession. So the Fed wants its cake too, bottom line. We don't want a recession, but we want to slow the economy. But it will take, very likely, a recession to slow the economy, and it's way out of control right now. So the most interesting stories of the week segment. Number one, last week we talked about Lowe's, which tested chips, which go into equipment that will disable their equipment if it's stolen. Well, along the same lines now, groceries, drugstores, and other retail outlets are now using more and more facial recognition, and they're using it to spot known thieves. So this will deter many repeat shoplifters too. And it was very similar to what was considered controversial recently, maybe a month or two ago. James Dolan, the owner of Madison Square Garden, used facial recognition to stop attorneys who were considered enemy against his positions, attorneys he didn't like. He used the facial recognition system to exclude them from going to the Rockettes and Madison Square Garden. And people said, "Oh, you can't do that, but it's private property." And so the facial recognition is coming in, the chips. With all these technologies, I would say, as if it ever had a future, crime will not have much of a future, especially shoplifting, down the road because of the technology improvements. In another story, interesting story, average office use in 10 major cities was 50.4%, which is much higher than it has been. It's been climbing. But the office market is a mess because, everybody knows why, because people are working from home and workers are demanding to work from home in some instances. So this is why, particularly, I stay away from office REITs, and also why I stay from storage REITs and most medical REITs, because eventually that's what they might be converted to. You have 3 choices. You can go to, if your offices can't be filled anymore, and eventually these leases are going to come due around the country and around the world, and there's going to be a lot of vacant office space. I don't think it's ever going to return. I'm sure it's not going to return to where it was. Workers like working from home, and workers have a lot of power, especially these days. Another interesting story of the week, more and more shoppers are turning to budget stores to buy their groceries. So stores like Dollar General and Budget, Dollar General and Dollar Tree, Dollar Tree and Dollar General. It turns out 1 in 5 shoppers is now saying they're buying their food at these budget outlets. And the budget outlets are actually carrying more and more fresh food. So they will compete with the grocers to a point, and the consumer is stretched. I just heard today that consumer debt rose the most it has in a long time. I forgot the period, but consumers are being pushed by this inflation, but they're not giving in to to reducing their demands too much. They're just making adjustments. And finally, humorous and interesting story, I thought. Cracker Barrel was, I imagine, offering free food for a year if someone proposes at a Cracker Barrel. So a few points. One, I think this is a real trade-off. There aren't many women who would say, I wish my husband had proposed at Cracker Barrel. And the other thing is, I wonder, what if she says no? Do you still get the free food? I'm not too sure. And I also thought, well, what if it's a reproposal? I don't think they'd accept that. Anyway, it's a good marketing ploy. We're talking about it. I'm sure other people are. It was in the news. So we'll go take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Wall Street Hackers.
One of the things that business owners forget a lot is to prepare for their own retirement.
Hi, my name's Nick Palavita, and today I'm with a very special guest, a certified financial planner, a chartered retirement plan specialist, and president of National Pension Partners, Max Culiet. Max, tell me what you do at National Pension Partners.
Well, Nick, we help successful small businesses and professionals put together retirement plans that provide them the maximum retirement benefits and big tax deductions at the same time.
Well, how do you do this?
Well, we get on an internet conferencing system with the client. We review their goals, what they want to accomplish, and then put together strategies to help them in implementing a retirement plan that benefits them, not everybody else.
Well, that sounds really good, but how much does this cost?
Well, it's really not bad because the first consultation is free. That allows us to go through and discover whether this strategy works for that business and for you as the business owner, and helping you maximize your retirement.
Well, Max, how do we get this free appointment?
It's really pretty simple, Nick. You can either go to our website below or call us at 877-252-1692, and then we can set up a time with either myself, Nick, or one of our other retirement plan specialists, another CPA or advisor in the office, to go over this with you and make sure it fits for you.
Hi, my name is Lewis Haupt. I work with National Pension Partners, and I work with businesses to allow them to put the maximum away that they can for themselves and to save taxes.
Hi, I'm Brad Coyle, and I'm the brokerage manager at National Pension Partners. We're always analyzing plan fund choices in order to ensure the participant's success.
If you want more information on how we can help you and your business put more money away in a retirement plan than you ever thought possible, contact us at the website below or call us at 877-252.
Okay. Hey, Kim.
We're all back.
So what to do? The Fed is in this giant experiment that I don't think has ever been done, where we're saying we're not going to have a recession. We're going to raise rates and keep them there longer, but not really raise them up to the inflation rate, which means real rates are too low. And in the end, I think rates could at least be heading to 6% or maybe even higher. And that's going to shock the market when they realize that. And it's going to be a long fight. The average inflation fight in one study in 14 countries over a decade was about 10 years. So the market is not priced for any of this. Later in the year, we're going to have an interest rate cut. I don't think so. Anything can happen, but I doubt it strongly. A few points before we get into the dividend stock of the week about some past dividend stocks of the week. Number one, the last 3 weeks, actually, I covered TELUS, BCE, and TELNY, just for a total of 1%. Again, keep in mind that I'm only 11% REITs and dividend stocks right now, and 29% energy, because you have to be very defensive in this market. But TELUS and BCE both had dividend increases this week, and TELNY had a great report, and they announced a buyback. So these are pretty healthy companies. And if not for the danger of Starlink and these satellites, I would be, much heavier in telecom. But there is some danger, which we'll monitor over the years. It probably won't happen, but maybe satellites will disrupt the traditional telecom business, which is, traditionally defensive. And also, I have to mention, I hardly ever sell a stock. I hate to. I mean, that's not the goal. But a stock I recommended maybe a month ago, FIS, which is Fidelity Information Services. I sold it at a small profit. You didn't lose money in it, but they came out with a report and it was okay. I think they'll probably keep growing, but it wasn't an upbeat report. And it went down on the news. Actually, it had gone up for a few weeks and then went down, but it's fine. But it was only a 0.25% allocation anyway. And I just don't like to lose money, and I don't like to take risk. But you need a little risk or you can't make any money except for in CDs. So dividend stock of the week. This week I picked a consumer staples, and it's actually the first consumer staples I have had for about a year. A year ago, I even got out of consumer staples, and they haven't done too well. If you look back to the market drop because of inflation and pressures. But I happen to like Unilever, UL, and I've been watching it a while. And so I just put a 0.25% in there too, and it happened to be in an IRA. Consumer staples, as I said, is very traditionally safe. But with these kind of pressures of inflation, everything, at least it's a bond substitute. That's how I view it. You can't only own bonds. You can, but I don't recommend it. So what I like about it, one is they've made a lot of, I think, very good acquisitions over the years. If you look at the companies they're buying, I know some of the companies. I think they're really heading in the right direction. Now they have a 4.5%, 4.35 dividend yield, which is not bad. It's better than most bonds these days. Certainly than a treasury or muni. And TD Ameritrade has an 11.9 price over cash flow, so it's easily covering its dividend. That's maybe a 9% cash flow, and its 5-year annualized growth per year. Its earnings per share has been growing per year 8.9% on average. Revenue's a little low at 2.2%, but I'm hoping that they're going to turn that around. But their dividends have been rising 5%, so they're annualized. So you know what? 4.4, you get 5%, wait 10 years, whatever, you're getting a pretty nice yield, not to mention if you're holding for a longer period than that, like lifetime, which is what I always want to do. So I like that one. I'm a little weary of consumer staples. And again, that's the only one I'm in right now because I have to be so defensive. I want, certainty. But I like UL as a decent bet. But now we will get into the panel discussion of the week. We'll get into that. The question is, how high could gasoline prices go? We know that there are oil shortages that are coming. I think that's 100%. I don't know. Kim, can we pull up the chart or should I hold it up? We can't even hear you, Kim. Sorry.
Should probably hold it up.
There we go. Just
okay. Should I hold it
next
up?
time, send it to me. I know that you've been traveling.
Okay, I did, but we'll work on that. Okay. So last week I showed, this is to me the most impressive energy chart I've ever seen. It's global oil capital spending for over a decade. And you could see that, I'm not going to go over the whole chart like I did last week, but you could see the average spending is that dark bar. And so since 2015, the oil companies have severely cut back on how much they're putting into oil and gas projects. But these projects take 5 to 7 years. The biggest ones take 15 years. And when they overspent before 2015, it resulted in very low prices ultimately and a crash in the industry. Well, the opposite is inevitable. With this little investment, it's going to come to roost. So oil is going up and gas is going up, but the question is how high? So the question will be for the panel, how high do we think gas prices could go realistically, but in a really bad scenario? Almost worst case, at some point, consumers will cut back on demand. But what are your thoughts, Kim and Nick? Either one. Kim?
So I think if it did go up and we don't do any kind of interference for capping what they can do, because it is a utility. I don't care what anyone says. And we cap our utilities from going and price gouging. But if it does and allowed to continue to go, I think probably $5 per gallon. Mm-hmm. But the biggest issue here is more about, where you're saying that we're not investing in it or the oil companies are not investing, but they are taking their money and investing in alternative. And when we go to CERAWeek, we're going to have a better real view of what's happening, not what you're getting in all these other places, but from the real people who are the ambassadors, the leaders, the owners of the industry. And you can ask those questions. You know,
Right.
I'll try to bring in my phone and I'll say, here's Peter. We got a question for you.
Yeah, we might be doing some interviews on the Energy Show with Sarah people, but I've already know enough about what they're saying. And they're saying what I'm saying. There are problems. You have world governments and the U.S. government is squelching their ability to produce, is putting opposition to all their efforts. The Biden administration, again, I try not to be political, but you have to mention, they've done at least 125 things, and many of them very strong things, to squelch the industry. Meanwhile, the industry is spending 10% of their budgets on carbon sequestration and developing new technologies, as Kim said. And also, as we said, if they're in a terminal business, they're not going to spend every last dollar until they go to business. So this is not good. Nick, what do you think? How high could gas, realistically, but in a bad case scenario, how high do you think it'll be?
$10 a gallon. In other words,
what a
it would not be impossible to see that. Well, we're looking at several factors that could take place that could push it up. Number one, the oil not coming from Russia. Number two, of course, we have Saudi Arabia, that when the United States gets squeezed, they just decide to squeeze us even harder. We have other macro economic forces in China wanting to consume more oil, India wanting to consume more oil, and the United States not producing oil. If you add up all these factors, then you could easily, plus inflation, you could easily see $10 a gallon toward the end of the year. They already predict that people won't feel it just at the pump, but you're going to feel it in your electric bills, which they already predict about a 30% raise if you haven't seen that already. So this whole cold winter, which will probably take place toward the fourth quarter of next year, is on its way. The only question is how hard it's going to hit.
And I think it's inevitable that it's going up much higher. I think, so here's my conclusion. First of all, nobody knows. Yogi Berra said, predicting is, I'm paraphrasing now because I had the quote, but predicting is really difficult, really hard, especially about the future. I love that quote. So, it's true. I mean, I don't know anything about the future 100%, but you go with the odds. I mean, this is almost mathematical in terms of supply and demand issues. So I just took a guess and said, if I look at that chart, I'd say at least a 15% shortage in gasoline supplies down the road. That's just at least. And if you look at oil, and gasoline particularly, it's generally considered inelastic. So that means basically people won't give it up unless they have to. So, you can raise the price and maybe somebody gives it up, but it takes a lot of price increases to force people to give up. And what if they have to give up 15%, maybe 20% of all the fuel being used? A lot of people are like, I can afford it. I'll keep driving no matter what, I'll just pay extra, or I need it to go to work, or I need it for my business, or I need to heat my house. A lot of that stuff isn't going away at a higher price. So an interesting point, Nick, because yours was a little higher than was higher, but then I thought, I did think of mentioning this. Europe, it's about $10 a gallon now, and they're surviving. Of course, they have smaller cars, smaller houses. It forced, that's one of the reasons why it costs a lot energy there. So I would say my conservative estimate was $6 to $7. I think it almost has to go to that. Why would I say not 5? One, it's been at 5, and people didn't cut back a lot. It didn't do it. It has to be a shock to people to say, okay, I need to lower my thermostat, or I need to buy a smaller car, or I need to stop commuting. People, especially right now, with increased wages, with people making more money, because of inflation, it's going to take a lot. So 6 to 7 is my minimum. And I might go, just for fun, right between you two and go 750. It might at a high be like 740. I don't know, 740. But it's going to go higher. Now, the last point about this is, what does that do to the economy? It's not going to be pretty. It's going to raise the cost of doing business for big companies, for production, for fertilizer, for food. Energy has driven hundreds of years of industrial progress in our world. and people take it for granted. Okay, no problem. We'll just, convert tomorrow to solar and wind. And, they're admirable goals, but you have to be realistic about how to achieve it and have a better strategy. So I would say probably at least 6 to 7 conservatively, because I hate to be wrong. Anyway, that wraps up Wall Street Hackers for this week. We'll be on every Thursday live at 1 o'clock. And if you're interested in energy particularly, we have the energy show coming up next. Thanks for watching.